So many services start at 11 o'clock sharp and end at 12 o'clock dull. We don't do that. We are looking in Hebrews chapter 12 for just a few minutes this morning. And I want to start off by telling you that we have all been saved to win souls. You are not saved to sit on a pew and whatever. You are saved to produce fruit, to pray for people, to make disciples of other people, to win souls. And having that in mind, the first verse of Hebrews chapter 12 says, "Wherefore, seeing we are circled about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us." Everybody in here has a race to run. Everybody has a particular race set aside for us by God, and it is up to you to run it. Nobody can do that for you. That is the path that God has given you, and He expects you to be faithful, and He expects you to run that course. And the way that you do that is you get the sin out of your life that always brings you down. Think about what is it that you're tempted to do all the time, and that's what you need to be running from, not running to. And you can run your course once you've got that weight off of you. Isn't it nice to have a weight off your back? It is. It is. And it says here, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus walked the path for you ahead. He's already been on any path that you can possibly think of that God has given you to walk. He walked the path that we walk now, and guess what? He won. He won. And He says, because I live, you can live also. And because He won, you can win also. We can win this too. Oh, you just don't know what I'm going through right now. Our Bible says, consider Him that endured such contradiction of sinners against Himself, lest you be wearied and faint in your mind. The people that God cannot do anything with are those that are faint in their minds. You have got to get back up and run that race and quit standing on the sidelines whining. I was always told that there's only one thing worse than a whining woman, and that's a whining man. And he said, thank you. He said, you have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. It hadn't killed you yet. And then He warns them, and He said, and you've forgotten the exhortation that speaks unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when you're rebuked of Him. Everybody in here that is saved, and everybody out there that is saved, you will be chastened by the Lord. You will be rebuked by the Lord. You will be corrected by the Lord. And in Amherst County lingo, you're going to get a whipping from the Lord one way or another at one time or another in your life. Nobody in here is so perfect that they can just float right on up. And it takes a long time to grow as a Christian, and God has to do things when we run off and when we stray and when we get out of His will, and He does things to bring us back in, and sometimes that includes chastening. For whom the Lord loveth, He chastens, and He scourgeth every son whom He receives. Now let's skip over to verse 12. So He said, wherefore lift up the hands which hang down and the feeble knees. Quit walking around like you got a tombstone under one arm and a coffin under the other, and if you were going to take a joyride, you'd do it in a hearse. Quit looking like Eeyore. Anybody know who Eeyore is? That poor old donkey that whines all the time and so negative. There are people that I just cannot bear to get around, because the moment I ask them, how you feeling, they go into an organ recital. well, it's this organ and this organ and this organ and this one is killing me. Quit looking so pitiful and quit whining and realize who you are and realize what God has placed you here to do and feel honored by that. And make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. The way to heaven is a straight and narrow path, and the path that God has given you is a straight and narrow path, and you should never veer from it. Go exactly where He told you to go and do what He told you to do. He gives a few other things here. He says, follow peace with all men. Boy, I'm telling you, that's getting harder every day. I have a list of people I just want to choke. I'll show it to you if you give me some money at the end of the service. Don't get mad if you see your name on there, okay? But follow peace with all men as much as you possibly can. And it says with holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. I'll tell you one thing, I'll never see the Lord with my holiness. And you won't see Him with yours either. I don't care how holy you think you are. You better have His holiness covering you. You better have the blood of Jesus covering you. And you better be walking in His path and in His way and depending on His holiness. Because you won't see the Lord without it. He looks at us and He sees the blood that covers us and not the way we really are. There's a song about that. We are so pathetic and we are so we're awful. And we need the Lord. We've got to have Him in our life every day. Then He says this, looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. And I've got a message from the Lord for this house this morning that I want to deliver. Because the Lord's been showing me stuff all week and been dealing with my heart all week about this. And listen carefully, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. Everybody in here has a birthright. You have an inheritance that God wants to give you. You have wonderful gifts that God wants to give you. A future that God wants to give you, and do not sell it out for a morsel of meat. Don't sell it out, because once you sell it out, you won't be able to go back and get it again. You let God give you what He wants to give you and don't go get it yourself. People, it's just like a child who went in the grocery store, and I've shared this many times with his mama one day, and he goes up to the produce counter, and man, there's some cherries sitting there, and he wanted them things so bad. That was his favorite fruit. And this great big man that was the produce manager said, son, go ahead and get you a handful. And the little boy just stood there and smiled. And the woman said, honey, didn't you hear what he said? Get you a handful. The little boy just stood there and waited. And finally, the big produce manager reached down and got a handful of cherries, and he gave them to the little boy. And the little boy thanked him and was on the way out to the store. His mother said, honey, why did you wait for the produce manager to give you those cherries? He said, because his hands are bigger than mine. Let God give you what He wants to give you. His hands are bigger than yours, and He's got something so much better for you. And don't sell out your inheritance for a moment of pleasure. I think about poor old King David and Bathsheba. When he was supposed to be out with his men and he was supposed to be out at war, he was at home laying in the bed. That'll get you in trouble. And he goes out and looks on the rooftop, and there's a married woman bathing herself. And he started looking at her and he started thinking, and oh, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I'm the great King David. And they brought her to him and he committed adultery with her. And then he had to lie to cover that up. And then he had to murder to cover that up. And a child was born out of that union and the child died. And the great prophet Nathan, I wish we had more Nathans today that won't lie and smooth over things to people that are in power and people that have great riches or whatever, and that will tell it like it is right to their face no matter who they are. And Nathan said, the sword will never depart out of your house because of what you have done. And we all talk about how great King David is, and he is. He's a man after God's own heart, and he's going to actually rule during the millennium and all that. But David never got over what he did. And in his house was constant chaos. And he wound up going to war against his own son Absalom as a result of that. God forgave him, but David never got over it. He never got over it. Please don't sell out what God has for you for that moment that the devil tells you is so great. And then here's one for you men. This is Samson. It'll work for the women too. He wound up loving the wrong woman. Oh man, I can bring 100 people up here that can tell you they married wrong. And look what happened as a result of it, and they're miserable. And it's a terrible thing. If you have to remain single the rest of your life, you are far better off than marrying the wrong man and marrying the wrong woman. You really are. You really are. I know that's cheap talk for somebody who's been married for 33 years to an angel from God. I know that. But I can tell you the miseries of it. Not that, but of the wrong one. She's watching on the monitor. I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to say it like that. Delilah brought Samson down. She cut his hair and took the source of his strength. And the devil will do that to you. They will find where your strength is, and the devil will take the source of your strength. And then he wound up losing his eyes. They burned them out. And they put him in a prison grinding grain like a donkey. And then the only time he got to come out of the prison house was when he went out into the stadium and the courtyard, where everybody could look at him and laugh at him and praise their false god over him. Finally, God forgave him and restored his strength. But it cost him everything, because he had to have the wrong woman that his parents told him, leave her alone. God told him, leave her alone. He did the wrong thing. The rich young ruler comes running up to Jesus, and he wanted eternal life. He had everything that he could possibly want, but he was not willing to follow Jesus. Jesus said, sell everything that you've got and pick up your cross and come and follow me. And he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. And the rich young ruler is in hell this morning. And he has been there for 2,000 years. But he got to keep his riches until the last minute. Think that's worth it? I had a man tell me back in the 70s, he was married, had a successful business, and had a child, had everything going for him. And he looked me in the eye one night and he said, David, I love money. I love money. And he said, I will do what I have to get rich if I have to walk over my wife and my boy to do it. He told me that. And it wasn't but about a year later, he lost that wife and he lost that boy. And he spent the rest of his years in poverty, alone. Wasn't worth it, folks. Wasn't worth it. I want everybody that's in here today and listening by radio and watching by TV to take a look at those drugs you're playing with. Everybody starts off playing with drugs saying, it won't ever get me. Those other people are just weak. I can handle it. But they'll always get you in the end. They'll get you soon, if not already. And sometimes the ravages of those drugs, you'll never get over it. I cannot begin to tell you the beautiful young people that I have met in my life that had everything in the world going for them, and now they got pockmarks all over their face from picking where they've been taking meth. You know what? God will forgive you, but them pockmarks will stay there to the day you die. Think about that stuff before you mess with it. And don't look all high and mighty if you're fooling with the prescriptions, because that's just as bad. Those things will get you just as quick as crack will. I don't care what the doctor says. You got to look out for yourself. And don't let those things take you over and conquer your life. It's not worth it. God can forgive you and God can put you on your feet, but there will be things that you've done in a drug state that you may never get over. Amen. Maybe there's a crime you're committing that nobody knows about. That will catch you sooner or later. Jesus said things that are whispered in the ear in the closets will be shouted from the housetops one day. And there are a lot of people sitting in jail right now. I have a lot of people that listen to us on radio in jail. And God bless you for doing that. But they can tell you they lost it all because they thought they were going to get away with it as well. And now let's get down to where the rubber meets the road, people. That man or that woman that you are not married to and stays on your mind all the time, that does not belong to you, you know that's wrong. You know that's wrong, and that's the one thing that people are falling for now worse than anything in the world. You'll fall sooner or later. You entertain the thoughts of messing around on your spouse long enough, and eventually those thoughts will go to actions, and you'll do it. You'll do it. I had a paralegal tell me that about 75% of all the divorces that she processes now came off of Facebook. Meeting somebody on Facebook. Let me tell you something. You meet somebody on Facebook and run off with them, you are an idiot. You're an idiot. You're a big enough idiot for running off. But if you got to find somebody off of, it's as bad as going to Craigslist. Have you lost your mind? That's a good way not only to lose your spouse, but to get killed. Lord have mercy. You'll fall sooner or later. Is it worth throwing away everything you hold dear for that little fling? Oh, Hollywood says it's no big deal, that everybody's doing it, and that it's not going to hurt anybody. And they don't show you the broken homes. They don't show you the miserable lives. They don't show you people in jail for murder over that. When I was in law enforcement, all of the real big murder cases was all over that. Multiple murders at one time was done because of that. Is it worth throwing away your testimony and losing the respect of everyone around you? Is it worth the punishment of God that comes as a result of that? I cannot begin to tell you of fallen pastors that I know. Some whose churches I attended. Some of them never got back on their feet again. They were never able to recoup from that, and they spent their lives with the most miserable look on their face. And if you were to talk to them today, they could tell you, no, it wasn't worth throwing away my family and my ministry for that little fling. Wasn't worth it. There's so many of them now that has been set on the sidelines. Oh, I'm not telling you it's the unpardonable sin, God can forgive you and God can restore you, but I'm telling you, you won't ever be the same again. Don't let the devil tell you that it will be all right. Jacob and Esau was a classic example. Esau comes in from hunting, and he's exhausted and he's starving. And he sees a pot of soup that Jacob is fixing. And he said, please give me that soup. He said, I'll swap you a bowl of soup for your future, for your birthright. The man who would have inherited everything from his father, being the eldest, just for that one moment of satisfaction, traded his birthright in. Everything that he'd get for the future for a bowl of soup. And I know a lot of you are saying, well, how stupid is that? Well, let me say this. If you're willing to trade in your future, your ministry, your family, and your life for a little fling, you're just as stupid as he was. Don't do it. Don't do it. The Bible says, for you know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. So don't throw away your life and your future for something that the devil is whispering in your ear, telling you that it'll be just fine and it's not going to hurt anybody and nobody will know. Pastor Bowley used to confront people privately for something that they did, and they would turn white as a sheet and go, how in the world did you know? And he said, God knows, and he told me. That's a scary thought, isn't it? But God knows everything that we do. He sees everything that we do. He knows what our thoughts are. And folks, this is not the time, and it never has been, to where our thoughts need to stray from the things of God to the things of this world and to the evil of this world. Because once you lose that blessing, you may seek it carefully with tears and you're not going to find it. A missed blessing from God is a terrible thing. I don't want to miss any of them. I know you don't either, but don't let the devil talk you out of it. These are things that cannot be restored. They can be forgiven, but they can't be restored. Does anybody realize that God makes every provision for the forgiveness of sins, but he doesn't make any provision for the consequences? We do reap what we sow. And let's be very, very careful. He tells us in verse 22 who's watching us. He said, but you are coming to Mount Zion and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to number one, to an innumerable company of angels that are watching you. They are watching what you are doing. To the general assembly and church of the firstborn, the saints that have gone on before, that laid the path in heaven. To God himself, the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men make perfect. There is like a stadium, if you will, in heaven, and they're all watching you, and no doubt they're cheering you on, but they see you when you do these stupid things too. And God is the one that matters. He sees, and Jesus sees. But everyone in heaven is they're kind of like on the sidelines. That's the assembly that's watching you. To Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant. They're all watching. They made it. They're cheering you. Why can't you go through the finish line, folks? Why have you got to be sidelined and let the devil talk you into throwing this away and throwing that away? Oh, man, let me tell you, the Christian life is amazing. Oh, it's a lot of battles and it's a lot of struggles, and the devil will fight you tooth and claw, but he can't win if you don't let him. It's the greatest thing in the world to say, with God's help and by the blood of Jesus, I whip the devil. I beat him, and he can't touch me anymore. All he can do is make noise and holler and scream and threaten. That's all he can do. But you walk with the Lord, and he can't touch you. He can't have you. Verse 29, for our God is a consuming fire. Do you realize who you are serving? Do you realize who he is? Do you realize that he bought you with a price that you're not willing to pay? He gave his only begotten Son to deliver us from sin, not so we could go back in it and do it, but so we could keep away from it. God gives his grace not as a license to sin, but as the power to keep away from it. Let him minister that grace in your life today and give you the power to overcome all these obstacles that are coming at you. And folks, I want you to think real hard. Is it worth what I'm thinking about doing? Is it worth what the devil's been whispering in my ear lately? And I hope you realize that it's not. Far better thing to hear Jesus tell you, well done, when you get up there in front of him, than to say, I never knew him. I don't know him. I want you to think about that. Let's bow our heads.